And this is institutional modern models of modernity. Basically, along with formal democracy, we have thought of the outer form as being quintessential to success. So what happened was that in the 19th century, particularly, the West discovered that if you're going to separate out these spheres, you find what the thing you're trying to do, and then you make a wall around it. So if you want to produce goods, you make a factory. If you want to keep people off crime, you make a prison. If you want to teach people, you make a school building, and so on. So each thing you're trying to do, you make a space, you put walls around it, you put in desks, you put in beds, a hospital. If you want to cure people, you make a hospital, put in the beds, you put in all the paraphernalia, and you have economies of scale. You know, instead of people pieceworking in their homes, they're all collected together on a conveyor belt. And it leads to huge efficiencies, you know, in the extreme form, Bentham's panopticon. You can have one guy looking out through little slits at hundreds of people and keeping order. So the institutional structure and institutionalization that occurs in the second half of the 19th century with modernity, very efficient, but it becomes a fetish. So you think now, or many people thought, if you want Africa to have economic growth, you make a factory. If you want them to have education, you make schools like Western schools or universities like Western school. You want them to have, now, to a certain extent, it works a bit, but it goes right against all their traditions of labor and social organization and so on. And even in our own society now, it's becoming less and less effective. We're finding our hospitals, our universities, all the big institutions are very inefficient. They're becoming overmanaged, as we mentioned. They're having to privatize much of their work because they can't do it themselves, and the contractors make huge sums and so on. So they are becoming inefficient, large institutions. So the economies of scale are being lost. And what places like China are doing, because they never had this tradition really, they, you know, to a certain extent, they went for this and they made their factories and schools and so on, but they're moving rapidly towards de-institutionalization, towards, as I've talked about before, you know, having Alibaba sets up a sort of Alipay and Ali marketing system. So people can sit in their villages producing the things, and then it's marketed on the internet. And you can do the same with healthcare, and you can do it with education and everything. So you don't need to pull people physically together and sit them down in a large. Now, COVID has taught us this one lesson. You know, much of this was unnecessary. You don't need to go to the office. You don't need to go to the factory. You don't need to go to the school. And combined with the new technologies, it's being possible to distribute and still be efficient, but in a virtual world. And I think that will be one of the big moves, not only to the decentralization of politics down to the local levels, but the decentralization of all the services that we need for a modern world, which will be much more distributed to the local environments.